A very good evening, friends. I welcome you all to the daily newspaper analysis brought to you by the Shankar IAS Academy. Today's date is 27th May 2024. Here are the list of articles which we are going to discuss today. But before entering our discussion, I have an important announcement for you. See, the Shankar Telegram's live series is back. This time, we are going to discuss about ancient and medieval India for UPSC Preliminary 2024. Note that the date for the Telegram live series is 30th May 2024 and the time is 7 p.m. In this Telegram live series, our experienced faculty, Shobhan George Abraham, will deliver a lecture on how to deal with the ancient and medieval India for UPSC 2024. So, don't miss this opportunity. So, back to our discussion. Let's get started. In this session, we are going to see two previous year MCQs and we are going to solve them. Let's see the first question. With reference to Indian history, who among the following is future Buddha who is yet to come to save the world? See, out of 4 options, the correct option is option C, Maitreya. See, Maitreya is considered as the future Buddha or Buddha of the future. According to Buddhist beliefs, Maitreya will be the successor to Gautama Buddha and appear on earth to teach the Dhamma and guide humans to enlightenment after Buddhist teachings are forgotten. See, in Mahayana teachings, a Buddha is a Bodhisattva who progresses to Buddhahood after many years. Mahayana Buddhists believe that there have been many Buddhas in the past and there will be more who will appear in the future. The previous incarnation of Buddha is Sumedha and the future Buddha will be called as Maitreya. See, Maitreya is mentioned in various Buddhist sutras including Amitabha Sutra and Lotus Sutra. Here we have to understand that Bodhisattva means someone who is on the path to attain enlightenment or Bodhi. So Buddhism has many Bodhisattvas and Gautama Buddha is also one of the Bodhisattva. The previous Bodhisattva to Gautama Buddha was Dipankara. Even the great king Ashoka considered himself as a Bodhisattva as one of his edicts mentioned him as Sambodhi. See, the stories about the past lives of Buddha are mentioned in the Jataka tales. They also talks about the ideals of Bodhisattva. Note that Barhut Stupa contains many Jataka tales which were carved on the stupa. If you look at the 4 options in the question, all 4 of them are Bodhisattvas. Avalokiteshvara is also referred as Lokeshvara in Sanskrit. If you look at the 4th option, Padmapani is also another name for Avalokiteshvara. So basically, the first 2 options and the 4th option are literally the same person. So the only odd person is Maitreya and that is our correct answer. Also know that the mural paintings of Padmapani and Vajrapani is found in the Ajanta caves. Padmapani holds a Padma or lotus in his hand, whereas Vajrapani holds a Vajra or thunderbolt in his hand. According to Mahayana Buddhism, there are 8 Bodhisattvas. You may take a look at it. Coming back to question, the correct option is option C, Maitreya. Now let us look at the second MCQ of the day. Here, 3 statements are given and we have been asked to find the veracity of the statements. Look at the first statement. See, the Indian general election of 1951-52 was held from 25th October 1951 to 21st February 1952. See, this was the first general election to the Lok Sabha since India got its independence. In these elections, the Indian National Congress (INC) won a landslide victory, winning 364 out of 489 seats, and it had secured 45% of the total votes which were polled. And Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru became the first democratically elected Prime Minister of the country. And moreover, Communist Party of India (CPI) came second with winning 16 seats. So the statement 1 is incorrect. Now let us see the second statement. See, in 1969, an official leader of the opposition was recognized for the first time. However, it got its statutory recognition in the year 1977. So statement 2 is correct. Now let us see the third statement. As we know that the leader of the largest opposition party, having not less than 1/10 of the seats of the total strength of the house, is usually recognized as the leader of opposition in that house. The 10% of the total strength of the house is 55 seats in Lok Sabha. This is as per the Mavlankar rule. So statement 3 is incorrect. See, from the options you could see that if you eliminate the third statement, you can directly arrive at the answer. So the correct option of the question is option B. So with this, now let us see the news articles of the day. Look at this news article. The severe cyclonic storm Remal began its landfall process around 9:15 p.m. on Sunday. So it made landfall between the Sagar Island in West Bengal and Kepupara in Bangladesh. Know that the cyclone intensified and moved northwards. By 11:30 p.m., the eye of the cyclone touches the land. See, this is the crux of the articles. In this context, let us understand about tropical cyclones from the preliminary perspective. See, the tropical cyclones are violent storms that originate over the oceans or seas in the tropical areas. For example, we can say from the Bay of Bengal, it is present in the tropical area, right? So, the cyclones that formed in the oceans or the sea will tend to move over the coastal areas. While reaching the coastal areas, it brings large scale destruction. See, the destruction is mainly caused due to violent winds, very heavy rainfall, and storm surges. And the tropical cyclones are meant to be one of the most devastating natural calamities. Know that tropical cyclones are known by different names in different oceanic regions. See, they are known as cyclones in the Indian Ocean. They are termed as hurricanes in the Atlantic. Then they are called as typhoons in the Western Pacific and willy willies in the Western Australia. See, the tropical cyclones originate and intensify over the warm tropical oceans. There are 5 major conditions that are favorable for the formation and intensification of the tropical cyclone. I will list them one by one. Firstly, large sea surface temperature which is higher than 27 degrees Celsius. Secondly, presence of Coriolis force. Now, what is this Coriolis force? See, the Coriolis force is an apparent force caused by rotation of the earth. To put simply, the rotation of earth about its axis affects the direction of the wind. Here, the force which is responsible for affecting the direction of the wind is called Coriolis force. Note that it has a great impact on the direction of the wind movement. That is why it's one of the major factors which is contributing for the formation of tropical cyclones. This is all about the second condition. Then the third condition is small variations in the vertical wind speed in the ocean areas. Fourthly, a pre-existing weak low pressure area or a low level cyclonic circulation, and simultaneously there should be an upper divergence around the sea level systems. See, these are all the conditions that are favorable for the formation and intensification of the tropical cyclones. Now, let us see about the stages of tropical cyclones. Firstly, the formation stage. See, the energy that intensifies the cyclone comes from the condensation process. As we know that condensation is the process through which water vapor in the air is converted into liquid water, and this process only helps in the formation of cloud. So, the conditions which we saw earlier and the condensation process encourages the formation of vertical cumulonimbus clouds which will be surrounding the center of the storm. See, this led to the formation of cyclones. And with the continuous supply of moisture from the sea, the storm is further strengthened. See, this is about the formation stage. Then comes the maturity stage. See, a mature tropical cyclone is characterized by a strong spirally circulated wind around the center of the cyclone. Know that the center of the cyclone is called the eye of the cyclone. Note that the eye is a region of calmness with subsiding air. Around the eye area, that is eye wall. In the regions of the eye wall, there is a strong spiraling ascent of the air to greater heights which reaches up to tropopause. See, the wind reaches maximum velocity in this region, reaching as high as 250 km per hour. Then, from the eye wall, the rain bands will radiate and clouds may drift into the outer region. See, this makes the cyclone a very strong phenomenon. This is about the mature stage. Then comes the final dissipation stage. As we saw earlier, the cyclones that formed in the oceans or sea will tend to move to the coastal areas or land. So after the maturation, the cyclone system moves slowly about 300 to 500 km per day over the coastal areas. See, the tropical cyclone dissipates when they no longer get sufficient energy from the warm ocean water. So while reaching the land, the moisture supply to the cyclonic system is being cut off and the storm dissipates. Know that the place where the tropical cyclone crosses the coast is called the landfall of the cyclone. See, this is all regarding the discussion. In this discussion, we elaborately saw the process and the basics of the tropical cyclones. Revise it often as this is very important from our exam perspective. With this, now let us move on to discuss the next news article of the day. This news article talks about food inflation. Now, suddenly it is news due to the imposition of export controls of wheat, rice, sugar and even onion. Even though this measures safeguards the consumers within India, they can cause demand pull inflation and hurt the farmers' interest adversely. So, the authors of the article suggest some of the policy measures to control such inflation. See, this is the crux of the news article which is given here. In this context, let us discuss some important points from the article using our mains answer writing discussion approach. Firstly, let me read out the question for you. Highlight the effects of sustained high inflation on businesses, consumers and the overall investment climate in India also suggest important measures to mitigate these effects. See, this question can be asked in GS paper 3 under the syllabus which is mentioned here. Since the question is talked about inflation, give a basic overview of inflation in India along with the context of sustained high inflation. In the main body of the answer, you can highlight the impact of high inflation on businesses, consumers and overall investment climate in India. And finally, in the conclusion part, you can briefly discuss how these impacts can be minimized as a way forward. This is the skeleton of how we are going to approach this question. Okay, moving on to intro part. Here you can write like this. Sustained high inflation characterized by a persistent increase in the general price level of goods and services can wield profound implications on the Indian economy. In India, consumer price index CPI inflation rate was rising steadily in the past months. The CPI last hit the lowest at 4.81% in June 2023. Recently only, India's retail inflation measured by CPI have eased to 4.83% in April 2024 from 4.85% in March. However, the sustained high inflation has profound impacts on the various parts of the economy like businesses, consumers, etc. And this is why it's very crucial to have the inflation under control. See, this way you can write the introduction for the question and move on to the main body of the answer. Firstly, we shall write about the effects on the businesses. See, businesses face higher input cost for the raw materials, labors and other operational expenses due to sustained inflation. This can erode the profit margins, especially if the companies are unable to pass this cost on to the customers. Secondly, with fluctuating prices, it becomes challenging for the businesses to set long-term pricing strategies, leading to uncertainty and potentially will lead to reduced investment. Thirdly, high inflation often leads to higher interest rate as the central bank will try to control the inflation, which will ultimately increase the cost of borrowing and reduce the capital investment. See, this can lead to crowding out effect, causing the distress to economy. Finally, businesses may struggle with inventory management as the cost of holding the stock will increase, leading to potential shortages or overstocking. See, these are all the effects on the businesses. Now, we shall see the effects on the customers. Firstly, as the price rises, the real value of the money will fall, reducing the customer's purchasing power and the ability to buy goods and services. Secondly, inflation diminishes the real value of savings, affecting the individual ability to save for the future or larger purchases. Thirdly, consumers face higher prices for the essential goods and services, which can lead to lower standard of living, especially for the low and middle income households. Finally, we shall see some of the effects on the overall investment. See, higher inflation creates economic uncertainty, will discourage the both domestic and foreign investment. Investors may seek more stable environment, which will lead to capital flight. Secondly, to combat inflation, central banks often raises the interest rate, which increase the cost of borrowings for businesses and consumers, which will ultimately dampen the economic growth. Thirdly, persistent inflation can lead to depreciation of the national currency, affecting the international trade and increase the cost of imports. Finally, in the conclusion part, you can suggest some of the way forward. You can write like this. Firstly, the central bank can increase the interest rates to reduce the money supply and curb inflation. See, this can help stabilize the prices but must be balanced to avoid the stifling economic growth. Secondly, RBI can conduct OMO or open market operations to manage liquidity in the economy, thereby controlling the inflationary pressures. Thirdly, the government can work on reducing the fiscal deficit by cutting down non-essential expenditure and improve the tax collection efficiency. Finally, targeted subsidies can be provided for essential goods, can help ease the burden of inflation on the lower income groups without distorting the market prices in an extensive manner. Apart from these, a concreted effort towards stability and sustainable growth can counter the challenges posed by high inflation and create a more resilient economic environment. See, this can be your conclusion. This is all regarding the discussion. In this discussion, we saw about impacts of inflation on businesses, customers, etc. And in the second part, we saw about how to tame the inflation. So with this basics, now let us move on to discuss the next news article of the day. Look at this article. In 2023-24, India recorded a trade deficit with 9 out of its top 10 trading partners, including China, Russia, Singapore and Korea. See, in this backdrop, let us analyze the economic trend in our discussion. Firstly, let us see the recent trends in the trade. See, the total export of goods in 2020 to 23 rose by 6.3% to $447.46 billion, while the import bill surged by a steeper 16% rise to $714 billion. See, by simple logic, we know that the imports far exceeded the exports. See, this will lead to trade deficit, right? This happened as the goods trade deficit rose almost 40% to over $266 billion in 2020-23 compared to $190 billion in 21-22. On continuing our discussion, despite the global headwinds like Russia-Ukraine war, US Fed rate hikes, etc., India has surpassed its 2022-23 target of 770.18 billions, which is 94 billion higher than last year's record exports. While USA remains India's top export destination, followed by UAE, and Netherlands emerged as the third largest good buyer, displacing China to the fourth position in 22-23. See, Netherlands' share of Indian exports jumped from under 3% in 21-22 to 4.7%, recording a staggering 66% uptick year on year. Moreover, Bangladesh and Hong Kong remained in India's top 10 export markets, although the value of shipments to their shore contracted 27% and 9%. See, as of April to February 2022-23, India's top 5 export destinations were United States, United Arab Emirates, Netherlands, China and Singapore. Now what about India's imports? See, imports grew by 5.4% over the November 21. The decline in imports growth has been more a balanced effect of declines in the volumes and prices. There is a fall in the imports growths. It suggests that India's domestic demand is weakening as the effect of a tighter monetary policy. Now let us see the top import categories. They are mineral fuels including oils, organic chemicals, electrical machinery and equipments, machinery including computers. See, the declining import categories are animal vegetable fats, oils and waxes, and gems and precious metals. According to the United Nations Comtrade database, India's top 5 import countries were China, UAE, United States, Saudi Arabia and Russia. Now let us look at the trade deficit trend of this year. See, the trade deficit with China, Russia, Korea, Hong Kong increased compared to the previous year. See this, with China, deficit rose to $85 billion, whereas in Russia, deficit rose to $57 billion. Thirdly, with Korea, India's deficit rose to $14.71 billion. And finally, with Hong Kong, India's deficit rose to $12 billion. See, the trade gap with UAE, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Russia and Iraq further decreased. China became India's largest trading partner in 23-24 with $118 billion in trade, surpassing the US. Note that the trade between India and US was $118 billion in 2023-24. The US was India's top trading partner in the previous 2 years. Finally, India has free trade agreement with 4 of its trading partners. They are Singapore, United Arab Emirates, Korea and Indonesia. Also note that India has a trade surplus of $36 billion with US in 23-24. India also has trade surplus with UK, Belgium, Italy, France and Bangladesh. India's total trade deficit for 23-24 narrowed to $238.3 billion, down from $264 billion in the previous fiscal year. But a trade deficit is not always bad if a country is importing raw materials, but it can put pressure on the domestic currency. So this is all regarding the discussion. In this discussion, we saw about the economic trends from preliminary perspective. With this, now let us move on to next news article discussion. Look at this news article. The reality of life for many Indians is a constant struggle against poverty, prejudice and inequality. See, it's characterized by harsh living conditions and limited opportunities. This is starkly visible in the cities like Kolkata and Delhi, where people sleep on the roadsides and children beg or sell items instead of attending schools. Despite India's economic growth over the past 3 decades, which has led to the burgeoning middle class and modern amenities like malls, cinemas, these developments have not alleviated the country's deep-rooted social and economic disparities. Firstly, with respect to economic disparity and poverty. See, India's economy, while growing, reflects the profound inequalities. The UNDP places the poverty line at 1,286 per month for urban areas and 1,089 rupees for rural areas. See, this estimates note that 22.8 crore people live below this poverty line. However, these figures are likely underestimated. the World Inequality Lab reports that the bottom 50% of the population holds only 3% of the national wealth and earns 13% of the national income. See, it indicates severe income inequality. Moreover, the government's household consumption expenditure survey shows that the bottom 50% of the household consume barely enough to survive, with stark differences in the consumption between rural and urban areas. On continuing our discussion, India's Global Hunger Index ranking of 111 out of 125 countries further highlights the country's struggles with poverty and hunger. The social hierarchy entrenched for thousands of years mirror the economic disparities, with marginal communities like SC, ST and OBC being the poorest. See, these communities often engage in low-paid manual labor and rely on schemes like MGNREGA for limited work opportunities. Moreover, on wealth concentration and political influences. In contrast, 10% of the population earns a disproportionate 57% of the national income. A small fraction of the population owns a significant wealth, with luxury car sales, substantial political donations, illustrating the wealth concentration. This disparity is evident in the political sphere, where wealthy individuals and corporations wield significant influences through mechanisms like electoral bonds, which totaled 757 crores in donations in 2023. Now, as a country which is going for election, we should focus on the political promises and future outlooks. See, for any party, the key promises should be, firstly, for SC, ST and OBC communities, conducting a national-wide socio-economic and caste census to inform the affirmative action policies. Secondly, lifting 50% cap on reservation for this community. And thirdly, filling of the backlog vacancies in the reserved post within a year. Secondly, for the youth, passing a Right to Apprenticeship Act guaranteeing 1 year apprenticeship with a stipend. Moreover, filling 30 lakh central government vacancies and waiving outstanding educational loans and unpaid interest. Thirdly, for the weaker sections like women, launching the various schemes to provide financial assistance to the poorest family, and the governments should focus on raising the minimum wages for the MGNREGA to 400 per day. And moreover, we should also focus on reserving 50% of the central government jobs for the women. See, this is the opinion which is given by the author in this article. We can take cue from this article and take points for our main answer. And regarding the political part, we can leave it aside. Okay. In summary, the article underscores the persistent challenge of poverty, inequality, and social injustice in India despite its economic progress. We as a society should propose specific measures to address these issues, aiming to create a more inclusive society. See, the electoral outcomes and the successive governments should focus on this in determining the direction of the efforts, and thereby it will lead to a more secured country's future. See, this is regarding the discussion. In this discussion, we saw about an opinion of the author and regarding poverty and inequality in this discussion. This is all regarding the discussion. With this, now let us move on to the next part of our news analysis, that is to discuss the preliminary practice questions. Today, we are having 2 questions. Let us solve them. Look at the first question. Consider the following statements with reference to trade deficit. Look at the first statement. When the money spent on the imports exceeded the money which is spent on the exports in the country, a trade deficit occurs. Okay, let us see the statement. See, when a money spent on imports exceeded the amount which is spent on the exports in a country, a trade deficit occurs. The trade deficit can decrease the value of the local currency, because when import exceeded the exports, a country's currency demand in terms of the international trade is lower. Lower demand for the currency makes it less valuable in the international markets. See the second statement. Trade deficit can decrease a country's currency value. See, the statement is correct as we have discussed just now. See the third one. Trade deficit allows the country to consume less than they produce. See, the statement is incorrect, because trade deficit allow the countries to consume more than they actually produce, because it means importing more and more and exporting less, which means increase in the consumption. So the statement is incorrect. So the correct option is option B. See the second MCQ of the day. In the South Atlantic and Southeastern Pacific regions in the tropic latitudes, cyclones does not originate. What's the reason? See, the tropical cyclone originate and intensify over the warm tropical oceans. As we saw in the discussion, large sea surface temperature, which is higher than the 27 degrees Celsius, is one of the favorable conditions for the formation and intensification of the tropical storms. If you take South Atlantic and Southeastern Pacific regions, in these regions, the sea surface temperature is cooler than the ideal temperature, which is favorable for the formation of tropical cyclones. Because of these reasons, the cyclone does not originate in the South Atlantic and Southeastern Pacific regions in the tropical latitudes. So the correct option is option A, sea surface temperature. If you like today's video, like, comment and share it with your friends. For more updates regarding UPSC preparation, subscribe to Shankar IAS Academy. Thank you.